On the last video, we talked about how planning is fundamental for your success within the mastery system, and that you have to decide what grade you want and then use that as a parameter to figure out how many points you need and how fast you're going to get through the topics. And then you plan your topic depending on how many days you have for it, and you figure out when to leave 1 day for the test, 1 day for the quiz, 1 day for practice if you have that many days. If you have extra days because you can go slower than that because you have enough days left, then you can spend some of the class time studying as well. Now, we talked about this in the last video already. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you actually achieve success within each topic. First of all, plan your home learning. Accept that you probably cannot earn a grade higher than a C if you cannot perform sufficient home learning. You need to understand this. Students have to do homework, okay? And within the mastery system, your homework is to study the material. And so accept that if you spend about 30 to 40 minutes a day, you're probably earning a C in the class. If you're spending less than that, you're probably failing the class. If you spend 40 minutes to an hour a day studying, that's when you get a B or an A, especially if you're in an honors class. And that's the reality of study. And if you have a teacher that's going to set the real standards, that's the reality of study. You cannot learn in school alone. It just doesn't work. It's not enough time. So accept that reality. And if you're not willing to accept this reality, accept the reality of failing the class. Because if a teacher has real standards and is holding you accountable for what you're supposed to learn at the pace, the crazy pace that the state sets up, there's no way you're going to learn what you need to learn in class only. There's no way. You're not passing that end of the course examination. So accept this reality. Also accept that some people will take longer to learn than others. Because people come in with different skills, different knowledge levels, and different interest levels. So you cannot compare yourself to others. You're really only competing against yourself. So when you accept that, you make a plan that applies to you. And you don't worry about what other people are doing. You worry about yourself. Of course, I encourage people to work with teams and work together to kind of get through the topics. It's because it's more motivating that way. But at the end of the day, you got to worry about what you need to do for your sake. Now, we talked about last time about when you plan to do things. Now, based on what your plan is, on when you're going to be taking that quiz. So, for example, in the example that we're doing with earth-based science, we gave some person that wanted to get a B in the class. She had 3 days per topic at this point in the quarter. So she needed to do, 1 day to do the test, 1 day to do practice, and 1 day to pass the quiz. And so, and then maybe do some clarification with the teacher in class. So, and with other classmates. So what you're going to do then is that means that day, that very first day of the topic, you got to come ready to pass that quiz. All right? So, based on the day that you're planning to take the quiz, that helps you determine how many days you have to study at home in doing home learning. Now, let's say, for example, you're going at a pace or you're setting yourself a goal when you actually get to spend 2 whole classes studying before you actually take the quiz. If you're thinking a regular class, for example, you can go at that kind of pace. That means then that you're going to have more time for home learning as well. Let me give you an example, okay? Let's say, for example, you finished a topic on a Friday of this week. We are on the 19th of April, all right, when I'm recording this video. And you finished the topic on the 20th. Now, I'm not going to see you again because you saw me on Friday until the Tuesday because we have block schedule. So that means you have Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, and Monday night to study the topic if you're trying to pass the quiz the very first day after I see you again. But if you're not taking the quiz at that point, if you have time to spend a whole day studying class, then you can count class as another study block, and then you can count that night as a study block, and you can count the 25th as a study block, and then in the next class, you're going to pass the quiz. So the number of days you have to study the material depends on the pace you're going at. All right? But that's kind of how it works. Sometimes you might have 2 days to master the material. Sometimes you may have more days to master the material and so forth. And some topics are going to need more days and some people are going to need more days, and that's normal. And that's why you have to set yourself a realistic goal. Now, how do you do this? Remember, count every day or every school night or every weekend day that you have as a block, even if you do not plan to study on that day. In other words, if I finish a topic on Friday, even if I'm not planning to study on that Friday night, I still got to count that Friday night. I got to count the Saturday night. I got to count the Sunday night. I got to count the Monday night. See how it works? Count every day on the calendar as a block. Now, add available level 1 class days as a block as well. I just talked about that. If you actually have enough time to spend a whole day studying class and still make it to your goal, in other words, you set yourself up and you saw that I can do 4 days per topic, and so I have a day to study in class if I want to, then you can add that day as a block as well. So you can, let's say for example, the example that we're doing, you would have 5 days plus that school night plus the school night after that, so you have 7 days instead of just 4. If you have 4 that day to study in class. It all depends on which pace you're trying to go at and what's your goal. Now, subtract from those blocks that you have available 1 day for review's sake. One of the days you're going to study to review to pass the quiz. The other days is the days you're actually going to be studying. So in the example that we were doing here, for the B student who had only 3 days in class, which means he only has 4 days to study between when he finished the last topic and when he has to take the next quiz. So he has 4 blocks because he's not going to use a class to study. He's going to finish studying at home. He's got 4 blocks to study, and one of these blocks have to be for review. So he has 3 blocks left. What you're going to do then is you're going to get the lecture guide for that topic that you're talking about, and you're going to split the lecture guide into 3 blocks. All right? So let me give you an example of that using earth-based science, for example, as an example. So let's say you're doing earthquakes and you're trying to master the material, and you have those 3 days to study that earthquake material. So there you go. Well, this is the study guide. We wanted the lecture guide, not the study guide. Sorry about that. So if you get the lecture guide, remember, your best friend. It tells you what you need to know. And here you have the earthquake lecture guide. So what I need to know, since I have 3 days to study, I got to get this lecture guide and split it in 3 ways. Maybe I go from here to here in 1 day, from here to here in another day, and then from here to here in another day. That means on the first day, I got to study this stuff. On the second day, I got to learn this stuff. And on the third day, I got to learn that stuff. If you do that, rather than focus, it's the same thing I talked about in the first video. Instead of setting yourself up these lofty goals that you probably will fail at, such as, I'm going to study this whole lecture guide today. I'm going to watch all the videos today. I'm going to do everything today. You're probably not going to do it because it's too much. So you're setting yourself up for failure. Instead of that, make smaller goals that you can achieve. You can actually achieve in that 1 day. So you split the lecture guide into minimal chunks that correspond to the number of blocks that you have available. And then remember to leave 1 day for review, because on the last day, what you got to do is go over all the blocks that you studied. And then you're going to be ready to take the quiz the next day. So that's how you plan out your home learning. Now, what goes along with planning out your home learning is remember that it's easier to do a task, like I just said, in parts, rather to study the whole lecture guide at a time. It's also very important that if you said, I got to do this chunk today, then you got to do that chunk today. You got to study for as long as you need to actually learn that chunk. If you don't finish that chunk that day, the next day you have to finish that chunk and do the next chunk. And if you cannot study on 1 day, you must make up for it on the next few days. And that's kind of how you have to set yourself up to stick to your schedule and to your plan, because if you don't, remember, you're not getting to that final goal. Now, you are worried about the final goal, but you're worried about what you need to do each day to reach it. And that's how you do it. Okay? Now, remember that you have to leave 1 day to review all the parts at the end, and it's also helpful to start each new day with a quick review of what you did in the previous chunks, because the more you repeat, the more retention you actually achieve. Okay? So that's how you study on chunks. Now, on the next video, I'm going to be talking about how to actually learn the material the best way possible. Alright? So I'll see you guys then.